if you're a true partner, true advisor to your clients, you should be able to have difficult conversations. There's moments where I think people need to be vulnerable. And as a professional, that needs to happen. I think people don't want to be perceived as maybe the business owner who doesn't know.
Show, we often speak about advising our clients, and I'm really excited today that we've got a practitioner, a speaker, and author about that, and we'll get to him in just a second. I'm Tom Waddleton, one of our virtual CFOs, and I am joined by my usual co-host, Adam Hale. Adam, welcome.
Hey, Tom.
And I'm going to move on. Chris Papin is our guest, and he's been a guest on the podcast before. And Chris, if you don't mind giving us a sort of background, career path, what brought you here, and we're going to then jump into questions.
Yeah, so I'm going to make a long story super short. I am the product of entrepreneur parents. I'm an attorney. I'm a CPA, represent small businesses and small business owners. I have multidiscipline practices, but trying to bring folks together with kind of knowledge bases, dispel myths, distill things down into what is otherwise complex, try to make it simple, and help folks through those inflection points that always seem to be confusing, challenging, or your neighbor's advice is maybe not always the best advice for a business owner. So that's us in a nutshell. I'm out of Oklahoma City and got folks in like 27 states at this different point. So kind of fun to hear the different regions and ideas and play in the same space as you guys. So it's going to be a fun conversation.
That's great. It is a fantastic background. I'll admit, as I was reviewing all the different things, just the number of tests to go through, I was like, I couldn't handle the bar after the CPA exam and then dealing with insurance products too. But how great, the number of times I've had to tell clients, hey, I'm not an attorney. You're telling me this. It's great that you got that you can give that advice.
So fun fact, took the CPA exam during law school. Passed them all. No problem. First try around. Looking back, not sure that was the brightest idea on earth, but as a young, dumb guy, just plowed right through. No big deal.
That's cool.
So I got to ask, though, which one's more difficult? Because is it the bar?
I get this. Yeah, we get this all the time. Sorry to kind of jump in on it. But so the bar exam is more focused and deeper on legal topics. The CPA exam is more broad. There's law elements in CPA, there's IT elements in CPA. So those things don't creep over in the bar environment. And then statistically, the pass rates, CPA exam is harder, but I think it depends on kind of mindset and stuff like that. I would say because of the breadth, the CPA exam was more challenging.
Yeah, see, that's all I wanted to hear. So
we got two sound bites. The whole show.
I ask everybody that takes both, and I'm always like, which one's harder? And then I just go back and rub it in all the lawyers' faces. Hey, that's cool and all, but the CPA exam's really hard. Now you can say, of course, but I didn't have a problem with either one, so I guess you've got the leg up on both of us. So, well, Tom didn't pass the CPA exam anyway, so I guess you got a leg up on
one of these days. Okay, Chris, you have a tagline, in fact, your podcast that we'll talk about, but they behave like a business owner. So I'd love to know, as a business coach, kind of what are your key findings and teachings when you're like, hey, I want you to behave like a business owner, and this is what I'm talking to you about.
Yeah, so I'm going to start this kind of with the emotional feel stuff. And I think listeners, business owners, other professionals, it doesn't really matter where you are. Like, you're in a moment and you're like, it would be a really good idea if. And sometimes that's right.
Mm-hmm.
But business owners, and think of your business as an investment, I think you look at statistics, numbers, history, decisions, you track those things. And this is where the behave like a business owner, we like to token it blabo as kind of the clickbait that's fun in there. But oftentimes, I'm guilty of this too. So this is not a shot at anybody, but we do the things we like to do, and we do the things that are comfortable. We do the things that are fun. Maybe we don't do the hard things, or maybe the statistics say that your online marketing effort is failing. Where are your leads? And sometimes when you're the person that made that decision, it's a tough realization to say, we should pivot. I wasted that money. And people don't behave like a business owner. So there's both an accountability element, but also this soft emotional feel piece that you kind of have to blend together. And I think people actually get lost in because it's our baby as a business
Mm-hmm.
and we're trying to develop that stuff out. So sometimes I'm a little bit overly blunt. I try to use humor to kind of get that out, but you've kind of got to shake people a little bit and say, okay, are you sure taking a distribution that exceeds the amount of cash reserves to operate your business is a good idea? Yeah, but I want that lake house. I disagree. I'm not sure that's a great idea, guys.
Yeah.
Well, you're not invited to my lake house then. So,
You know, the best lake house is your buddy's lake house.
Sure.
Right.
So many times, at least what I'm hearing is part of this is holding a mirror up in front of them and asking the question. Sometimes, like the question you ask, sort of in a really obvious way of, are you sure this is what you want to do? Is in
Yeah.
that mindset, sounds like.
Well, if you're a true partner, true advisor to your clients, you should be able to have difficult conversations too. I mean, we were kind of teasing that pre-show, right? There's moments where I think people need to be vulnerable. And as a professional, that needs to happen. It's okay to say, I know this much about a marketing plan. Go hire somebody else that's an expert. I know what SEO is. I don't know how to do it. And that same vulnerability has got to kind of translate over on the other side. And for some reason, I feel like that gets lost, particularly in the beginning of relationships. I think people don't want to be perceived as maybe the business owner who doesn't know. My
Right.
kind of my quip for medical professionals is, like, hey, all that business school advice they give you in medical school is really coming in handy whenever we're filing the tax return. And most docs look at me and they're like, Chris, we didn't do any of those concepts. And I'm like, no, you're catching up. You're getting my point. I'm the expert here, not you. Why are you pushing back in a way that's unhealthy? And sometimes that's able to evolve that conversation. And I'm sure you guys face the same thing. When you think about, think about CFO type role,
Sure.
like you are the financial expert in the room. You're closest to it, but people are going to tell you they don't believe the numbers. So what do you do there?
Sure.
Well, I think more than anything, you hit on it with the managing difficult conversations. Actually, we were talking about that today and talking about our road mapping and planning for education for 2026. And we always say, hey, every year we do some topic around managing difficult conversations. And no matter how many times I preach it and I talk to our team, it feels like the only way, from my experience anyway, the only way to really understand that is whenever you just didn't do them very well to begin with. So for us in our world, a lot of times, you mentioned the lake house and the distribution. Sometimes it's like just the sales are coming, I don't need to let anybody go. You try to kind of say things under your breath, and you're not really like grabbing them by the shoulder and having that conversation with them. And that for us it always comes back to bite you, right? Because 3 months later, 6 months later, whenever they come to me and they say, hey, I wish Tom would have told me this. He should have just gave it to me straight. It's like, he was kind of managing the relationship. And so do you have any like kind of tips or tricks around, how you manage those difficult conversations whenever it seems obvious to you, but maybe not to the business owner?
I usually try to just lean in like we have and say, guys, it's about to come out and you're not going to like me. Sorry for what's coming out next, but I'm not doing my job if I don't say the following things. That's part of the reason you're paying the fee. And I think people will respect the fact that you're acknowledging, hey, get ready. Internally, and I tease about this with clients to their face too, so I'm not really hiding anything, but sometimes I also think it's about an art of saying, how do you say I told you so without saying I told you so? So frequently we've had conversations, and I know you guys have both sat in these seats where it's like, hey, your sales are trending down. If those sales continue, you're going to have to think about A, B, C. Oftentimes we'll paper that up. There will be a memo to the client, maybe a video recording, whatever it may be. So when you fast forward and they say, I wish you'd have told me, sometimes you've got to go back and say, well, how did you want me to say that? I flat told you, if sales don't continue, do the following. What did you hear? And sometimes people are like, oh, well, I figured there was going to be a follow-up. And sometimes I have to legitimately ask for advice. Like, what did you want me to do next? I thought I told you, and maybe I didn't, or maybe it didn't deliver the right way. But usually that brings people back together so we can brainstorm what the next step is rather than worry about whose fault it was. The story you're telling about, but hey, sales are trending down and we think they're going to come back and we didn't. This reminds me of folks that, hey, I've got a financial person and I think they're stealing from me, but to hire somebody else is going to cost 20 grand more. And I think they're only stealing 2 grand. It's cheaper to keep them and have theft. That is terrible tone at the top. And if somebody else knows it, they're going to take advantage of you too. But the conversation that goes with that is not a structured one. It's very emotional. And I am a creature of calendars and reminders and structure. That's hard. Sometimes you need an hour and a half and you only got 40 minutes. What do you do? Tell somebody that's in tears, hey, I need to reschedule. We've got to be humans in that too. So kind of unpacking that, you've got to be real. You've got to be willing to kind of flex with the story that goes. But I have found, just like I'm kind of teasing about, hey, and when there's theft, that's terrible tone at the top. Like, what if your number one competitor knows that's going to happen? They'll take advantage of you. And when you start to tease those thought processes out, usually people rise to the occasion and say, you're right. This is hard, but I need to do the right thing, especially if you'll kind of start to show the path. So it's teasing the whole, how do you say I told you so without saying I told you so? But usually we are on two trends. We are on paths. I'm not perfect. I've messed up too. But there's a conversation that's a precursor. And I don't know about you guys, but my crystal ball is broken. I can't predict what's going to happen next. I need help to figure out how that precursor is going to play out. And usually when I say that, business owners will say, you know what? How do we have a better conversation to avoid this next time? And that's my client. If you start blaming me and whatever else, that probably has a life cycle to it that's going to end at the next renewal.
Yeah, let me focus or emphasize one thing that I really liked about that. What Adam was asking initially was sort of that permission to give that hard thing. And what I really liked is the beginning. I think what you said is, hey, what you pay me for, the advice you pay me for. And Adam, do you recall what you told us your get out of jail free card is? Sort of our version of that?
No, financially speaking. Yeah.
So I've used that over and over. And it really helped me in one case where I was telling a client that they need to reduce their staff and got a very strongly worded message from someone after the meeting saying, you don't understand our culture. We care about our people, all the reasons why you wouldn't want to reduce people. And I do want to be sensitive to that. But Adam's term that where I can then say, hey, financially speaking, you can't afford the size of team given the sales that you have and things like that. And it's hard to argue with the math when you put it like that. And then you can say, I do want to be a person. I want to do all these things. So how can we avoid that? But that is a really nice one. The other thing I like, and maybe you can talk about this a little bit, you're not always sure, right? I mean, they say they want to do this and you can have in your stomach like, yeah, I'd like you to get the lake house. And if all the things go right, but I'm curious, how do you get yourself past the like maybe a little bit of a gut instinct, like I don't know about that, when you're not 100% locked in that this is a terrible idea?
So I think in our world, and your comment about financially speaking rings true. If I were to insert financially speaking into my vocab, the numbers don't justify themselves. A bank is going to say, hey, we want more collateral in a scenario like that. So there's lots of opportunity to talk your way through it. And typically when kind of the scenario you're proposing here is if things don't quite line up to gut instinct, I just remind people, I'm not here to run your business. I'm not the 99% shareholder with voting control. I'm your professional advisor to stand shoulder to shoulder and sit at the board of directors table to help you reason through your decisions. Here are things to consider. And then I just kind of have to pause and create that awkward space. Business judgment rule in law basically says, as long as you're an informed consumer, you can be wrong, and you are permitted to do that as a business officer. And sometimes I think we need to let our clients have that space to exercise the business judgment rule. We as financial professionals want it to be right, but guess what? They taught us how red numbers work too. Sometimes there are losses. And it's completely okay as long as we draw the correlations and inform our clients to make their decisions. It's hard for me to do, but hey, let me make you aware. And everybody has a different tolerance and appetite for risk. Some people will say, I don't ever want to get sued, but no, don't refer me to an attorney so I can get that operating agreement. That's going to cost too much. If you have an operating agreement, you won't get sued. I mean, it's counterintuitive logic, but
Sure.
you just have to have the conversation and kind of go through it. But that's usually my styles because I'm not driving the decision. I'm just showing the patterns and giving my 2 cents. I don't have a vote. I don't own shares. It's the business owner's decision to make.
Right. I agree. And I do exactly what you say too. I lead with the financially speaking, just so, again, trying to take the personality out of it for a second. And then I do say, hey, you would be mad at me if I didn't tell you this. This is just, my professional advice. And then what I quickly try to pivot to, especially if I can tell it's something that they really want to do. I had a client just the other day, this time of year, it happens pretty frequently. You set aside all the money for taxes, and then about this time of year, they're wanting to do other stuff with that. And they're like, hey, why don't I just take from this or take from that and I'll pay it back. And so a client the other day asked me, I don't think I quite want to put all that money to taxes. Why don't you let me spend that on marketing? And so then I had to just kind of, tell them my thoughts and why. And then what I immediately kind of go to is like, oh, if you want to do that marketing, then we just need to let's brainstorm together what we need to accomplish in order to get that to happen. And then very quickly, either one, they find a way that it actually makes sense and it works and we're good, or 9 times out of 10, they kind of talk themselves out of it anyway. You know what I mean? You kind of let it, and that's to your point, whenever you're saying post-mortem 6 months later, hey, how could I have said that better that you didn't understand it? What I'm trying to get them to do is repeat what I said to make sure that they understood it. So I'm like, no, I don't think we should do that, but let's talk about, or yes, you can do that, but you have to do this in return. So we talk about that a lot too. I say yes to a lot of stuff. If you ask me, should I buy that house and take the distribution and do all that stuff? My answer is usually yes. But then I'm going to say, but you got to be able to do this, this, and this, and this. Let's take a look at the numbers. And I go, do you think you can do this and this and this in the next 3 months or have this? And then you're usually like, no, I'm not seeing that. I don't think I can. I'm like, yeah, me neither. And then, usually the conversation's good. So I got to turn it on them a little bit.
Yeah. I do like the simple accountability added in there, Adam, because you could have said, hey, I figured out a way you could do it if you can do this, 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 and this. And if you stop there, they're nodding their head and spend their money, right? Just the simple question like, do you think you can, sort of does force that accountability.
Yeah, you definitely want them to work through the numbers and the logic and what would have to happen. And yeah, usually most of the time they'll self-select out. But I know you talk a lot about, and I think this is, for the clients that we serve is also kind of an interesting concept as well. I mean, we know the business is kind of an extension of the personal, no different than what you were just talking about with that. So, in terms of how do you generally address whenever you're working with a client, an owner's personal financial goals or financial stress for that matter, how it kind of shows up in the business, especially around decisions around pricing, hiring, growth, how are you working that stuff in?
There's no one recipe here. We follow 2 or 3 templates that kind of go with it, and the 2 easy ones are either the individual lifestyle drives the business decisions, or the business decisions drive the individual lifestyle. Those are kind of your 2 easy ones. So let me clarify a little bit so everybody's on the same page. But oftentimes, let's say you're a one-man band. I'm an attorney. I don't have any support staff. So I want to have X, Y, and Z in my life, so they can kind of extrapolate that back to billable hours. That means I've got to put in 1,800 billable hours a year. They do the math pretty easy. That one's pretty straightforward. Then you've got other businesses where typically have more folks involved, but restaurants are an easy analogy on this because restaurants are a function of volume. There's certain things that are fixed costs, and then the business owners typically shift their decision making based on the success of the seasons, the years, the different promotions that they're running. So the business yields a result, then they make decisions. Those are kind of the 2 typical recipes that I see. Not always the case. Everybody complicates that, and industry matters, personality matters, and all those fun things. But in both scenarios, emotions typically drive the conversation. So I like to unpack the personal side of it and just say, hey, walk me through goals, ambitions, wishes. Usually there's some sort of work-life balance function that people are having a hard time navigating, is the way I'm going to say it. It may not actually be, it's just a perception of. Like a restaurateur that's worried about, do we have enough sales? Do we have the inventory right? Do we have the mix right? So they all of a sudden they're at the restaurant all the stinking time. Now they're sacrificing family time. Typically their hours are goofy from everybody else's anyway. So I try to focus on what is that trigger first. Because usually if I can unpack what's going on and say, okay, if it's a work-life balance issue, then I can start to script some of the conversation to address what the actual issue is. Now, reality of that is people can't tell you what the driver is. I'm guilty of it too. Like people ask me, what are the goals for your business earlier in the week? And I'm like, well, mathematically, we want to grow by about 12 to 15%. We're going to do that through some online marketing. We've got a different strategy to do that. And all sounds great on the surface, but then it's like, okay, so what are you going to do on Monday to achieve that goal? And sometimes that's what lands hard. And again, I think create that space. And Adam, you said this in kind of the last little segment here, in the sense of, how can I get some more information, or perhaps get them to see the same information, or maybe me to say the same information they see, so that we're all looking at it through a similar lens, but with different objectives. Once I get there, that's usually when we can make progress. Sometimes that's real quick. It's a 20-minute conversation. Sometimes that takes 18, 24 months. But the personal element of it is like, what drives people, or what's your why kind of mindset? That usually aligns folks so that you can start to unpack the other pieces. And like Whitney, our director of operations, she was teasing me the other day. She was like, Chris, you interrogated that guy like you were an attorney. And I'm like, I am an attorney. And she was like, yeah, but you're not a litigator. Like, you were relentless on the goals questions. And I was like, we went back and watched the recording, and I was trying to extract data, but I lost the personal touch in it. And she fortunately caught it, interrupted, redirected us, and kind of talked it out. But I called the client back later and said, hey, sorry about this, but here's what I was trying to get at. And he was like, man, I wish you'd have said that. I felt like I did something wrong. So I say it in that sense of, I intended well. I was trying to get at something that I couldn't get at, and all I had to do was ask the threshold question. Why I didn't, I don't know. But I think clients behave like that with us too. And somewhere in all of this chaos of answer that I gave you, it boils down to what drives people, what's their why, and how can we align with them to achieve that objective. That part's pretty easy. Getting there is hard.
Yeah, definitely. That's why I love that book, The Five Whys, just kind of drilling in. And it's definitely part of our onboarding process. Sounds like it is yours. Any client, you're just, to be a financial Sherpa, which is what I think we're all striving to be, you need to understand where they want to go in order to help them get there, right? So if anybody's like, if you have clients, so let's say you onboarded the client, you understand where they want to be. They can't quite figure out how to get there, that kind of a thing, and for business owners that are feeling, financially anxious, that you're running into. I know it doesn't matter when this podcast airs. It feels like almost all the time that I can remember in 20 plus years of working in this space, it always feels everybody's financially anxious at one time or another. Even whenever you look back and look at whenever stuff was just booming and crazy and great, it was a roller coaster right before it, right after it, all those kind of things. But what are the first couple steps that they can take to gain more clarity and make better business decisions? Like, what do you work with them on in order to make them feel a little bit less anxious?
I think number one is getting clarity. A lot of the business owners we talk to don't actually have good books and records. Or maybe they have good books and records, but somewhere around October 1st of 2025, they got clarity about their 12/31/2024 financials. It's about 10 months too late. Stuff like that is hard. And I mean, we all live in that world where like the reconciled solid data is after the fact. But you can have a better gut instinct as you go. And most of the business owners that I work with actually have a pretty good instinct. They kind of know what's going on, but they're looking for that validation. And I think the financial statements start the validation because the numbers are the language of business. So that's always where I try to go first, because at the end of the day, I think we're in this to make money, unless you happen to be a nonprofit or doing things a little different. And there is nothing wrong with that. But if what your objectives are maybe are a little shy of what you're able to achieve, or vice versa, maybe there's a realignment of expectation. And I know I said it earlier, but I always try to go back to the basics on stuff like this. But if your goal is to grow your client base, but you never do marketing, there's only so much we can do to help. There's a medical professional that I was talking to recently, and out on the West Coast. And in my mind, I'm sitting here going, you live in the most population-rich density in the United States, and you won't leave your house to go to a networking event to meet more people, but you'll spend all the money in the world on online ads. This makes no sense to me. Go to your stinking neighbor and say, hi, I'm a doc. I'd love to have new patients. You know of anybody? First visit's free. People would kill for that, especially in medicine. So it's little things like that where sometimes you just have to think your way through a little bit differently, because people get stuck in their paradigm. Like this person was from big healthcare organization, and all of that was handled for them.
Yeah.
Not really a worry.
I think what I kind of hear you saying at the beginning, and even more so there, what I heard you say originally was, first things first, make sure you got your house in order, right? Like if you want to know how to get to a destination, you first need to know where you're at. We always usually give kind of a geography going on vacation analogy. Somebody says, hey, I live in Indiana and I want to go to Florida. It's like, no, you actually live in Michigan. You're further north than what you actually think. Right? So we get you down a little bit before we can even start this journey. But the rest of it, from going from Indiana to Florida, is really about being intentional with the business. And that's what I heard you kind of talking a little bit about, is helping them get intentional with what those things are too. So do you have any, like, what's your magic wand, or what are the kind of tools or things that you implement to help clients get that, gain that intentionality around that? Do you have like a recurring meeting, or what does that look like?
Yeah. So kind of this marketing analogy, take it for what it is, but we like to know what an end result or an end objective is. That helps. Okay, we know we're going to Florida. Ideally, we're going a little bit south and a little bit west. How you get there may not matter, but at the end of the day, we need to have that anchor point. So yes, there needs to be accountability in the meeting. Sometimes we just have to ask, depending on scope of engagement. Maybe I'm your accountability partner, maybe I'm not. Maybe I am going to help you measure revenue. Maybe you've got somebody internally who can read the financial statements and you don't need me to do that. I typically want to align with what the client's want is, but also then once they kind of enumerate, hey, I'm thinking ABC. Okay, well, if all we do is check in twice a year, is that actually enough to achieve your marketing objective? Do you have other folks around that? And to your guys' point with all of these things, like in that dialogue, you start to extract information that helps align. I don't have to be the accountability partner, but I do kind of need to know you're doing some version of marketing, so that when we're doing our projections, your revenue should be going up. That's part of my analysis, part of my role as an advisor. So I try to create this space so that we know what the objective is, or we know we're going to Florida. If all I'm supposed to do is check in each evening with a cell phone call or a text or something like that to say, hey, made it to the hotel, cool, that'll be my role. And that's usually inside of our scope agreements. But sometimes clients don't know to ask for it. So we try to lead with some version of that. We can do A, B, and C. Would this make sense for you? Does that fit in your engagement? I try to recommend that up front, but sometimes you don't know until midway through. But best example I can give is a conversation I had today. Client doing an estate planning, and in the middle of the estate plan just derails And it's like, what about my business? I'm like, it's a good point. I have buy sell. It's like 7th on the list of things to talk about. And he was like, yeah, but that should probably be number 1. Without that, all this other stuff doesn't matter. Okay, we've got to realign to what they see as their priority at that point. So we've got to be flexible enough in all the other conversations to kind of resurface those things together. Because what happens if all of a sudden we're going to Texas instead of Florida midway through?
Sure.
Hopefully they're making a right turn, but what if they don't? Is that really my role to tell them? Did I even know they're going to Texas? Those are a lot of the things that I think are important. If you're sitting on the client side, like, ask your advisors, what role do they want to play? Where do they want to sit? Because I think you guys, like, if somebody hears CFO, they think, oh, you're going to do all the things for my business, but I'm willing to bet your engagement letter says differently.
Sure,
Right?
there's a priority. Yeah, I am curious. Do you have a standard? We're always doing a forecast for it. I shouldn't say always. Our usual approach is we've got a forecast that we're building things on top of, and we've got this level of advisory. Do you have a fair amount of standardization and processes in place? And what would that be?
Yeah, so we have what we call just a base level business owners package. It's a base level advisory. Everybody that is a client needs to understand, how are you taxed? Because if you respond with I'm taxed as an LLC and you're my client, you're fired. That is a bad answer. You better know you're a sole prop partnership, S corp, or C corp. I don't expect you to know how, but I do expect you to know what form you file. So there's things like that to where we want to bring people to that base level of understanding. But in that, a lot of folks are S corporations, and I still get questions like, hey, I know we've been through this, but tell me again how my distributions are taxed. The tax dorks in the room are laughing. All of the business owners are going, oh, I'm waiting on his answer. They're not. Free tax advice of the day. Distributions are not taxed.
Yeah.
Your profits are. Wait, where are my profits? And then, which I cringe whenever I hear that. I'm like, remember that little green dot? QuickBooks Online, guys. So it's conversations like those where sometimes you've just got to re-level people back to kind of financial normal, because they're an expert doctor or IT consultant or advertising company or insurance agent, not financial person. So we want to be regular. And to answer your question, we've got that base level engagement. We have some predetermined touch points that are on us. We will lead those. I will not lead all touch points. Not my job. I need the client to be accountable and present when they have questions, when they need help, when there's material changes, because they're going to see that before we'll ever know it. So it's a two-way street where we partner to kind of step our way through an anticipated schedule of meetings in any given year. If I say, hey, we're going to meet quarterly, everybody thinks I mean April. Nobody wants to meet in April. So that might mean like March, June, September, and November or something like that. But I mean 4, not every 3 months. But once we get through that barrier, that cadence usually kind of rinse and repeats itself. And then you scale up as people grow, you scale down as they slow down. Sometimes people bring folks in-house. I mean, that's the recipe of you just got to pivot and change as everything goes through. So long-winded answer there, but I think it helps people see there's at least a minimum standard, and then you got to go through a couple of different iterations based on client need or life cycle in their business.
What does an average client look like for you in terms of just the size of the client profile kind of thing? Are they $100 million, $1 million a year in revenue? Like, what's that look like?
Yeah, so the vast majority of ours, I'd say we could capture 99% if you snapshot like 3 million or less in revenue. We still take startups. I know a lot of folks, it's kind of a blessing and a curse, but we've got like a little startup package where usually you're not working with our highest level expensive folks in the room, but we've got other members on the team that can kind of get people into a infrastructure that then justifies the next steps. But I say that 99% by count, maybe not by revenue. Of course, we've got folks in the multi-million-dollar range too. And usually that's multiple entities, multiple locations, generational family businesses. Sometimes it's one-man bands. I mean, we actually have a couple of those, and I don't know how they're doing it, but they're killing it. I'm proud of them for it. But the vast majority are that traditional small business of a service-based professional that's got 2 or 3 folks that are trying to help them execute on serving their community.
Chris, why don't we shift a little bit? You host a podcast, right? Behave Like a Business Owner. Can you tell a little bit about that and what kind of things that people are liking what you're talking about today that they might hear over there?
Yeah. So the Blabo podcast is exactly that for a reason. The idea is to interview anybody that's in the business space and talk about literally any topic, even though it may not be business. It may be talking about ways that you can attend your kids' athletic events, because business owners struggle with those things. But I strive so that it is authentic, real. Yes, we edit it in post to clean everything up and make it concise. But I had one of my dear friends on. He had an internet problem. I closed the episode. We didn't doctor it. We're going to do a 2-part episode because guess what? Business owners have internet problems too, right?
Yes.
But that's the real that I want people to see inside of it. And it's all over the place. We get industry experts. We get, I'm going to tease about the financial dorks. Usually those are probably the most boring episodes because we're talking about technical things, but anything under the sun is fair game. And it's designed for people to take one thing away, literally one thing from their time with us, go take it back to your business that week and do something that improves your business, makes your life better, makes your family life better, whatever it means. Just one thing. That's it. It's not hard. That's an easy ask, I think.
Yeah. I like that. And I can think the other reason our listeners might like that is if they are advisors, you're listening to a business owner. And even if you don't take that lesson back to your own business, you can say, if I was advising someone with a similar issue, I've just picked up some way to try to use that piece of information.
Yeah, you hit on something I've never told anybody outside of like the production bubble, but other advisors have given me feedback along the way. And they said, when you interviewed the pest control company, he said 2 or 3 things he wanted out of an advisor I never thought of before. So you're on to something there because you hear things differently depending on what seat you're sitting in. When you're in advisor mode, you're taking notes and you're doing certain things. When you're in listener mode, it lands different.
Yeah.
So thanks for the opportunity to get that off my chest.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I hope people will check that out. So as we're talking ways you're public, you've also got a book coming out, or maybe came out right around the time that this episode launches. 168 Hours, a startup business guide that respects your time. We'd love to hear more about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. So the essence of this is, does anybody know how many hours are in a given week?
I do
Spoiler
now.
alert. Yeah, it's 168 hours. So in this, whether you're an athlete, a business owner, a mom, a dad, a kid, a teacher, whatever it is, we all have 168 hours. How we choose to execute on those 168 hours matters. And we've kind of tried to take a business plan, condense it down, break it into a whole bunch of different sections. And candidly, not every business is going to use every chapter. But the idea is you can focus your time, which is so incredibly valuable, on the things that matter most to your business. And we've kind of given a roadmap inside of there to allow people to DIY, get started, give them some tips and tricks about things they should be talking to advisors about, give them some ideas about, I don't know, insurances, for example. Everybody as a small business owner gets to an inflection point. And it's like, do you have general liability insurance? Like, why would I buy that? As a small business owner, that's an expense. When you're starting up, it's an incredibly expensive one. When you're a more mature business, not having that insurance is an expensive mistake. So it's things like those that maybe can kind of accelerate the learning curve for those that are new, or for those that are established and kind of trying to bump to that next level. Use it as an accelerator. It's an incubator. It's, there's a workbook. It's easy. Fill in the workbook. Go from there. We all want the cheat sheet, right?
Oh, that's good. I'm looking forward to that. Even just the title, as I look through that, I very rarely have conversations, but I need to start with some owners who are struggling about where is it that you're spending your time in the business? And, some could be marketing, and maybe to what you said at the very early on is that might be something that they just hate doing. And so they see it's not being done well, but they're really good at something else. So they're in micromanaging another part of the area, maybe just that conversation, maybe you can uncover, or I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised to give an answer like, I know automatically, I know I should be doing blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, all I did was ask the question. So I would assume part of this is, where are you spending your time in the business is the right area.
There does need to be a self-reflection on any of that. And this is an old client of mine, and I'll change his industry and name, but he was one of the most exceptional back office people you've ever seen.
Mm.
The part that was tough, he was in a sales business.
Okay.
He never sold. Every time I talked to him, he was in the back office. And if he'd have partnered with somebody that was the consummate salesman, I think that partnership would have flourished. But he failed because he wasn't client-facing enough. But he was technically correct on everything else. So it's things like that hopefully there's a little bit of a hard truth when you look at it and say, am I really best served answering an hour's worth of emails first thing in the morning and draining my battery and being exhausted by 10? Maybe I should put that off until 4 o'clock. I don't know what recipe works for everybody, but if you can reflect on that, I think it starts to shine a light on where are the pain points, what are the things that I can change. Are there places where maybe I can delegate, hire, or perhaps fire? I never want to say that, but sometimes that's the hard truth of you're better when you trim the fat a little bit. Sometimes you can run faster, and that's an okay thing to do from time to time.
Sure.
Yeah, I think having that kind of checklist on how to interact with advisors and stuff would be super helpful, because people just don't know what to ask their CPA versus their lawyer versus their financial advisor. There's a lot of confusion, and you'll hear them come. Well, for you can answer the legal and the accounting questions, but for us, a lot of times we're like, well, that's actually your lawyer. Actually, that's a great question for your financial advisor. So helping them navigate that as well as small business owners, I think, is super helpful.
Well, let's hype some CPAs for a minute, because financial advisors, insurance agents, car dealerships, neighbors, everybody says check with your CPA, right?
It's true.
Constantly. And then I'll go back and pick on attorneys. They say check with your CPA. Your CPA says, I'd really like to get this closed at year end because that would make the financials easier. That way we don't have split year returns, blah, blah, blah. So what's the attorney do? They close it on December 12th. There is nothing worse than that recipe, right?
Yes.
But I think there's an interaction in there, and I do want to bring it back, and I'm teasing this on purpose, not because I'm self-serving to all of us here. There is a unique crossroads for CPAs and in your financial professionals, your CFOs, because the numbers are the language of business. That's where it all happens. There's a reason they're all saying check with the numbers, people. Awkward pause there, but there's a reason for that. And if you don't invest properly in that relationship, you're blind, because most people are not financial experts and frankly aren't very good at numbers in a lot of instances, because most of my clients say, I hate this stuff. I don't want to deal with it. They want to ignore it. So it's a Adam, I think you're raising the right point in the sense of how do I interact? I don't want to interact. I don't want to think about it. Can't you just handle it for me? But the problem is we need people present. And I'm sure you can't advise a client that's not accountable, present, and giving you their goals, can you?
Right. Yeah. No, I think one of the things that we find through the sales process, and I really get a really strong, good reaction out of whenever I tell clients, I'm telling Tom on, hey, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. We take a very prescriptive approach to everything after we've had an opportunity to kind of diagnose. But I'm like, oh, and you're required to meet with me here, here, and here. If you don't, then I'm going to need to let you go. I tell them that before they even sign up, and they're like, whoa. I will definitely show up for that. That's super important. And I'm like, okay, cool. That's the kind of people we want to work with. And they're like, yeah, that's who I am. So they almost kind of talk it up, and, I make it a big deal that they have to show up. Not that they wouldn't anyway, but whenever I kind of throw it in their face, it tends to get interaction.
That's great to hear, because and Tom, I'm sure you got a story on this too, but I know at least me, I have clients that no-show meetings and then throw their hands in there and why didn't you tell me? And you're going, guys, when was I supposed to tell you at meeting 1, 2, or 3 that you didn't come to?
Right. Yeah. But my story very early on in working here, I had a fairly new client who said, let's compress all 4 of those meetings you have into the end of our weekly cash flow, and we can probably do it in 15 or 20 minutes. Now, I was new enough to like, I'll try, but I don't feel great about this. I didn't have that confidence. 2 months down the road, he's not very happy. He meets with our partner, Jody, to talk through it and kind of says, hey, I'm not happy. And Jody said, how in the world would you expect to get all your forecast, your financial statement, all that done in 15 minutes? And the guy kind of paused. And the same thing you guys are saying, that now that I'm more experienced, I'm like, I can tell you that won't work if you're not going to invest the time. Or to your point, Chris, if you're not going to show up, of course you don't get it. But it's very obvious. And Adam, I love you're required to attend. That's a really good way to say it.
Me too.
Emphasize that partnership. Okay, let me close this out with one sort of a little bit different question. Would love to hear each of us. How is AI, any particular problem you're finding yourself over and over kind of saying, AI is making my job a little bit easier because of this? And if you're ready, Chris, I'm great. If you guys need a minute to think through it, I can tell you the one I was thinking of.
So I'm going to go into maybe a little bit different angle. We'll see. We'll compare notes. But I have found it's helping educate clients differently because they're actually asking ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, whoever, should I be an S corporation? And they're getting some feedback, which is awesome because I don't have to set the table anymore. I can focus on, it's better for you to do A, B, and C because here's the executable points, which is really where I need to be anyway. But sometimes getting people to understand what the executable is, I lost folks, or I couldn't get them to the table in the right way because they're still trying to make the decision, whereas I knew what the right answer was 6 months ago. And absent a deadline, sometimes folks tend to kick the can. So I found it as a wonderful education partner, if you will, even though it gives bad advice and even though it has steered clients in a difficult direction, it's raising the level of conversation that I'm having with people, and I'm grateful for it.
Nice. Adam, how about for you?
My answer is pretty lean right now. I mean, we've got a couple really cool AI initiatives going down, that we're currently operating on. One is to kind of be the preparer, be the senior accountant. I'm pretty hopeful in that one. Another one is where we're looking at taking all of our meeting notes, like all of our transcriptions, and turning it into like a data lake to be able to proactively prompt reminders on different things and do things without, make us look like we remember everything kind of a thing. So those are two cool ones that are kind of in the works, but not really helping me today. Today, the one that I use the most, and I use it multiple times a day, is just the email. I mean, every time I think I wrote a smashing email, I throw it into chat and they rewrite it. And I'm like, damn it. And I always pick theirs. So I just am done with it. I just type my email directly into chat and then I copy and I paste it and I put it in. I don't even bother drafting a nice one first anymore.
Yep. I would say for me, it's probably similar to your email, maybe a little different. It's helping me come up with a way to present things to clients in a way that they understand better. And I'll give you just one example. Our usual approach is with our professional service agencies, you should spend 10 to 15% on sales and marketing, 10 to 15% of your revenue. My question was flipping a little bit though, as I look toward next year, how much should that team be able to produce in terms of sales? And so I came up with a couple of different things, but went in, talked to Chad and said, hey, if you act like you were a Bain or a Kinsey consultant, here's my question. And it just presented a simple way to understand it where they said, we've got something called the value chain, and it should go from, the initial prospect to this many conversions of this and that. And here's what it should be. It was similar to what I was doing, but it painted in a way that when I presented the client, they were blown away just kind of with the simplicity. And then also in this case, their team is not very productive. So you're like, if they can't do this, then you don't want to spend this much money on them. But it was one that I probably would have spent a lot of time trying to think a way to explain it that was just, once I kind of half figured it out, it said, well, you do it this way. And then if you put a name behind a big consulting firm that came up with this, then they love how smart you can make yourself sound.
Yeah.
So thinking through those kind of problems.
This reminds me of a conversation I had with another CPA. Her original gut instinct was, isn't that cheating? and I kind of looked at her funny, and we had a back and forth. But at the end of the day, we landed at a language learning model is exactly like a tax software. It's a specialist at communication.
Yep.
And Tom, I think that what you just said illustrates the point. It knows how to deliver it in a way that a client can consume it.
Yeah. And maybe, and if you want to expand on her piece, maybe it's cheating if you don't put any critical thought in up front of what you're trying to do. Right. If you said, I'm not going to think about this, how much should I? And then you just grab the answer, yes. But if you have thought through it and said, okay, this is the problem I'm dealing with, I've actually thought through, help me make it better. And then it's explaining that, I think you can do really well.
Yeah, I assumed that in this, and it took me a little
Sure.
while to kind of understand her perspective. But she was thinking from like the raw copy and paste, like you're saying.
Yeah.
Hang on, we got a job to do here. We carry some credentials. Think about it a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. If I hear someone say, I had a 10-page paper due and I had ChatGPT do it in 20 minutes, in my mind, I'm like, okay, it sounds like you were cheating. My guess is now.
Right.
That kind of thing is what I'm thinking of. I can definitely see how it could make it so much better because you put a lot of thought in it, improved it. Adam, probably similar to your email improvement. But I assume you didn't just give it a one-word sentence and say, write the email.
Did she say the same thing whenever they invented the calculator?
That's what I was teasing her about. I was like, what are analytical procedures in audits? And she was like, oh, yeah, I kind of get your point.
Right.
Like, it's just a different tool that we use to get to an objective.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Chris, this has been great. I do hope people will check out the Behave Like a Business Owner podcast and your book. I think you told us before the podcast, the book would be available if you were to search, Google search, Amazon, kind of those type, where you can find books. Is that right?
Papinspeaks.com, Papin speaks.com. You can go direct there, but it'll be on all of the online retailers. And, I've got a great publisher that's along for the ride in there. And he steers most of that. So thank you, Zach, along the way.
That's great. Well, thank you very much. This was really enjoyable.
This was great.
Same here. I appreciate the opportunity and always enjoy collaborating with some leading minds in the industry. So thank you for the opportunity very much.